Hello and welcome everyone. I am Dr. Portia Jackson with the City of Houston's Office for Business Opportunity, and we are excited to be here today with Nickea Bradley to talk about disaster preparedness for businesses. Briefly, Nickea Bradley is the Deputy Director for the City of Houston's Office of Emergency Management, where she oversees the Emergency Management Program, which includes the coordination of disaster mitigation, planning, response, and recovery. Previously, she has served as the Bureau Chief of Long-Term Risk Reduction and State Hazard Mitigation for the Office of Homeland Security in DC, as well as she has supported responses for hurricanes such as Hurricane Jonas and Hurricane Matthew, as well as flash flooding, the flu in Iowa, and many other major national events in the United States. And we are so glad to have her here today with us to share information about how small businesses can prepare their business during disasters. So Nickea, it is so glad to have you here, and I'm going to turn everything over to you.
Really appreciate the opportunity to share some of the information I have with our business community. They often play a very big role for us in being able to, help us recover faster. And so the more information that we're able to share with them so that they're prepared, the faster our city can recover for any type of disaster or interruption that we are having.
Awesome. So I'm going to turn the floor over to you and go ahead and start your presentation and let us know all that we need to have ready to have our businesses prepared during disasters of any kind.
So when we talk about business preparedness, I always like to talk about what is an incident. I think it's a good opportunity for us to think about, like, what do we consider it? It's basically an unplanned event. If it's damage, loss, it disrupts your business. Some common ones we have in Houston, everyone loves to, talk about the flooding and the hurricanes are probably our two most. Thankfully, November 30th is just around the corner. Fingers crossed, we'll skate by the rest of this season without any major impacts. So that's what we really think about when we think about an incident. So what does that mean to our businesses? You have to start thinking about your communication strategy. Here's a few questions that I often ask folks is, when you're setting up or thinking about alerts and notifications, who's your weather that you listen to? How do you send alerts to your employee? Have you tested this system regularly? How often is your contact list updated? Do you have a way to communicate with your vendors or customers to let them know you're not open? One of the things that has happened since COVID-19 is all entered our lives in March is that some of these things have now got tested. Previously, they may not have been tested as regularly. Now we see that businesses are communicating now to their vendors. They're letting their customers know if they're open. Hey, if you may not physically be able to come in and maybe eat or use our business, but we can bring it to the door, or we can do drop-offs to you, and that business is augmented. And so that has helped communication strategies that previously were not tested or utilized as often. But remember, with those communication strategies, to think of these 3 questions just as a minimum as you're preparing not only your staff, but your vendors and customers that interact with you. Also, if you think of, as you think about who are the best places to get some of the news and weather updates, NOAA is always a good weather location. And then for us, we have Alert Houston, which we'll talk about a little bit later, that can give you updates and information in impeding storms or events that pop up around the city. Some immediate actions that you could take right now to prepare your business are 2 things: life safety and what I call stabilization. So life safety being thinking about evacuation, shelter in place, and lockdown. We'll talk about each of those a little bit later in the presentation, but briefly, evacuation meaning, maybe there's a category 4 or 5 hurricane coming straight for Houston, and there's some mandatory, even voluntary evacuation for people to be able to move to safer places. Shelter in place usually happens when we have things like there's air quality issues or water quality issues, or even, something that requires us to stay inside the house until we know it's safe. And then lockdown is usually associated when we have like an active shooter event. And we are trying to, it's similar to shelter in place and you're inside of the house, but lockdown being more where you're also barricading or making sure that you're hiding and doing other things just in case an active shooter might be in your area. Stabilization is usually what are some things that you can do until help arrives. Fire extinguishers. We always hear about fire safety and doing fire drills and making sure your extinguishers are up to date. Defibrillators, if someone is having a medical event and being able to have that again until the help can arrive. First aid kits. I often trip and skin my elbows or things around. Have that first aid kit to get some ointment and some band-aids on it. Chemical showers. We don't have to do that hopefully ever, but in the event that you're exposed to chemical or chemical aerosols and things, you can take those chemical showers and rinse yourself off to get that off of you. Also create monitoring teams to check and test this equipment. Another thing I always recommend also to our floor wardens, if you need to evacuate or someone needs extra assistance with being able to leave the building, that you also have those teams that are available to assist. So let's talk a little bit more in depth about evacuation. With evacuation, you want to clearly mark evacuation routes and exits, know at least 2 exits from every room of your office, know how many desks or other markers are on the route. These are so important. A lot of times when we begin to having an emergency, having practiced this, you kick into muscle memory and you know exactly where to find those exits. Often when I stay at a hotel, I always walk myself all the way down the hall to where the exit is. I open the stairway so I know what it looks like, so that if there's an emergency, I let that muscle memory kick in that I have walked down that hall to find that exit and not be a little disoriented and not know where to go. As I just mentioned a few minutes ago about having a floor or evacuation warden, just someone to make sure that everyone has left the floor. Also, if someone needs extra assistance, that's where those evacuation and floor wardens can be helpful. A rendezvous or regroup site. You want that somewhere outside, away from the building. Make sure that someone has, as the next bullet says, taken names, so that when you get outside to that rendezvous point, someone can take a quick attendance to make sure that everybody is safe. Also, to make sure that your visitors are a part of that list of names, so that when you get outside or someone who's not familiar with your normal protocols has been taken care of. Always remember those that have disabilities, access, and functional needs. Like I said, they may have mobility issues or they utilize a wheelchair and might need some extra assistance if there's evacuation. And reinforce all of this through training. Practice makes perfect. It helps remind us of how, like I said, that muscle memory kicks in, but remembering what those protocols are. Where is a fire extinguisher? What would I do if I skin my knee or I hurt myself? Is there an accident report that I fill out? Some of those things also play into our evacuation. So just as some food for thought, when we think of evacuation, where do you go in the evacuation? So we talked about meeting up outside, but then after that you release folks. How do they get that information of, is it safe to report back to work? Do I need to come back to work? Is there another site you want us to go work at? If it caught fire, is there an alternate location? How do we get there? And can you get home? Because some types of events, let's say for flooding, for example, it's, a lot of widespread flooding. We had some heavy rains while we were all during the middle of the workday. Are your employees able to get home? Do they need to shelter in place there at the job until maybe the water recedes or another route is open? So also be thinking about some of these questions as you think about evacuation. I also want to talk about go kits, because in an evacuation, sometimes we need to grab some things and take things with us. So for employees, your go kit or your grab kit might be cash. It might be a charger, a bottle of water. And these are things that could just already be prepped in your office that if something happens, you just snatch it and hit the road, because sometimes you don't have a lot of time to think through things, or it's not safe to go back and try to grab your purse. So if that bag is readily available, at a minimum, at least I have some cash in there and some basic things, and I grab that and I head right out the door. As employers, we have to think of other things like insurance paperwork, contracts, and the employee records, IT redundancies. Are my files backed up regularly? Do I have the licensing that go with it? All the things that you would need in terms of making sure that you have your IT components backed up. And then those emergency supplies. As we've thought about some of those other types of emergencies, do we have, again, some cash, some water, a first aid kit, even towels and garbage bags? You'll be surprised how helpful garbage bag can be. If I didn't have a coat and we were stuck out in the rain and we evacuated immediately, I could use that garbage bag as a poncho. So all those things are things to think about with your go kits, and make sure they're sealed in a box or a type of bag that can get wet. A lot of times our emergencies include being wet. It might be the fire sprinklers going off, or it might be the rain outside. There's a lot of different reasons why we might get wet, but if they're sealed, that keeps those items safe. So let's talk about shelter in place at your workplace. So shelter in place, this is exactly what it says. Stay where you are. Don't go anywhere. Lock the doors. Sometimes it might involve sealing your windows or turning the air conditioner off. If there's a problem with air quality, they'd want you to, try to seal your windows. Sealing your windows could be as easy as using duct tape or any type of tape that you have available, turning the air off, recording the names of everyone in the room in case anyone gets separated if you're asked to evacuate or move locations, and always wait for the all clear. Just because you look out the window, things look like they might be okay, doesn't mean that it's actually okay to go outside. Wait for that all clear. And then room considerations. Where is a good place to shelter in place? Usually we look for interior rooms. Interior rooms are rooms that don't have any windows. So usually like a conference room, bathrooms, places like that where it's an interior room. Above the ground floor, usually, especially if we're thinking about like any problems with floodings or something like that make you shelter in place, you don't want to be on that ground floor. Minimal windows and vents. If you can find a landline phone, I know that's almost an unheard of thought in this day and age, but if it does have a landline phone, which is also why we kind of look at conference rooms sometimes, they usually have a hardwired phone. In event of an emergency, sometimes our cell phones don't work, and that hardwired phone can be the only thing that gets out. Another thing to do if you don't have a hardwire is try texting. 911, you can text to 911, you can text to the family, even if maybe you can't get a signal out to actually be able to call. And then lastly, if there's a radio or TV that's available in that room, that gives you an opportunity to hear what's going on, know if there's been an all clear, that you have something like that in that particular room. Couple more things as we go on. Think about your building floor plan. I know a lot of places have a building floor plan, usually near some fire extinguishers, but take a moment the next time you have a chance and go look at that floor plan. The same thing that I talked about with being at the hotel room and you want to walk all the way down to that exit, knowing your floor plan can be very helpful. Where's the security panel? Where's the electrical shutoff? Are there sprinklers? These are all things that could be fairly helpful to know where they're labeled at in your building, so that if maybe you're having an office meeting at a different part of the building or a different floor that you're not used to, these floor plans can be helpful to familiarize you with what's going on in that particular floor. So other things to do with that is also clearly label any of the resources: shelter in place, exit, fire extinguishers, those defibrillators, anything type of hazmat storage. You'll be surprised how many buildings have things that have to do with hazmat. If there's a pool, there's chlorine materials around. If you're some type of manufacturing, there's a lot of chemicals or things need to make paper or other things. So it's good to know where that hazmat stuff is stored. And then also those control valves, if there needs to be an emergency shut off, or we need a control panel to try to see if we can get the lights back on. Understanding where those things are is very helpful in an emergency. And keep go packs. I'm a strong proponent of those go kits. There's also a go kit that can go along with this. If I am a floor warden or an evacuation team member, having a go pack that has maps or key fobs or contacts for the front desk, that they're readily available in the case of an emergency that I can get in contact with people. Building security. Some of the things that I think of also when we think about emergency preparedness is that building security. Knowing who's supposed to be there and who's not, especially when it becomes an emergency situation, or if you're the first person back on scene after an emergency, making sure that folks that are authorized to be on those grounds and know what safe and not safe areas to go to. That's where that building security becomes important. Knowing that, the employees have their IDs visible. Sometimes when we have emergencies, people go into shock and they sometimes can't even remember their own name. Having those badges visible is something you can easily look at and be like, hey, Chandra, are you okay? Let's, talk through this in that emergency. If, like I said, there's visitors there, who was, able to walk around, who wasn't, but to make sure that they're accounted for. Making sure that people aren't in restricted areas. In the event of an emergency, everyone's ran outside, but then you want to be sure that folks aren't places where they shouldn't be. And then also that limiting, like piggybacking or limit door propping when necessary is important too. If there's an active shooter in the area, that door propping can be very scary, and you want to kick those out to make sure to keep other people safe inside. One of the last couple things I want to bring up is insurance. A lot of times you forget about insurance and the importance of it, but find out if you're in any type of flood risk, because we said that's one of our top hazards here. If you're not, there's plenty of places now that offer flood insurance. Know what your different limits on the insurance are. Remember, that was one of the items I said to put in your go kit, because as you try to rebuild after a major event, you need to know what type of insurance you have. And there are also other types of insurance that can assist you for loss of revenue, fixed expenses like lights and water, and then just cost of operating if you had to go to a temporary location. There are all these different types of insurance to explore. Especially like now, as I talked about COVID-19 at the top of this, that has changed so much of what we do every day and how we look at some of these items now, having been involved in this particular incident for about 6 months. So also, make sure that you're looking into your insurances and knowing what's available. We covered a lot of information in this short amount of time. So if you need to refer back to some places, here's some websites to help you. HoustonEmergency.org. That's where you can find anything about our emergency management system, what type of alerts, and sign up for that Alert Houston that I discussed. And then Houston Recovers. If you've experienced damage, how do I file a claim? How do I let someone know I'm having, I had some damage? Houston OEM. This is if you need some preparedness resources, like how to prepare for a disaster. What are all the things I could put in a go kit? We have preparedness guides. We offer them in 6 different languages, and you can request them there. And then lastly, when in doubt, 311 is a huge line for just general, anything that you need. I need to report damage. I need to get that preparedness book. 311 can help navigate any of those things. So always put that on your speed dial too. The 311 is a wealth of information that can be able to direct you in the right location. We don't have any time for questions today, but when in doubt, here is my email address and telephone number. I always ask, give me a buzz or shoot me an email. If there's something that you didn't get a chance to think of today or that I didn't cover, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to assist. Thanks again, Portia, for having me.